All right, Bismillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa afdalu salatu wa atamu taslim ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa radiyallahu ta'ala an asatidit tabi'in wa ulama'na amalin wa a'immatul arba'atil mujtahidin wa muqallidihim ila yawmiddin. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, this is class number 20, where in the book Mukhtasar ul-Akhdari fil ibadati ala madhhab al-Imam Malik, which means the summary of the Akhdari, the name of the author, Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Akhdari, on the ibadat, or the acts of worship according to the school of Imam Malik. Alhamdulillah. And wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you who preceded me in the greetings. Share the video and let me know if you can hear and see me, inshallah. Thumbs up, yes, or something. Sometimes you could be talking for like 5 minutes and they'd be like, oh, we don't hear you, you mute. I mean, you let me talk for 5 minutes? I know it's a little delay. Alhamdulillah. Khalifa said it's clear. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Isa. Gonna start naming you Sheikh Isa. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So today we're on page number 25, chapter 9, and the Sheikh is covering the subject of Tayammum. Tayammum is what's normally translated as dry ablution. In other words, in certain situations and times, when you need to make ghusl or wudu, and either you can't find water or some other circumstances, you're allowed to make what is called dry ablution. And so we'll just get right into it. We're not going to cover the whole section because there's a few things that come out here that I'm pretty sure a lot of us didn't know. So I'm going to mention these things that come out. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال المؤلف رحمه الله فصل في التيمم ويتيمم المسافر في غير معصية والمريضة لفرائضة أو نافلة ويتيمم الهادر الصحيح للفرائض إذا خاف خروج وقتها. He said, Tayammum is done by a traveler who is not on a mission of disobedience, and the sick person for the fard as well as the nafila prayers. The healthy resident may also do tayammum for a fard salat if he fears missing the prescribed time. So there's a few issues that we have to mention here. The first thing he said is tayammum is done by a musafir, a traveler. In traveling, it didn't cross my mind till just now to define traveler, because sometimes, as English speakers, a lot of us are converts, we take words that are that we use every day in our normal language, and we transplant them to Islam. Like, say, for example, I'm here in Pittsburgh on the East End, and I say, okay, I'm traveling downtown. Some people may mistake that, or you're a traveler, so you can do this when you're traveling. Or anytime the fiqh books mention traveling, they say, okay, you're going downtown, which is, I don't know how many miles, 5? Something, give or take some miles, like 5 miles, right? He's going downtown. No, that's not what's meant by a traveler. A traveler is someone that's going on the journey and is measured by distance. And this is really important because a lot of things are based upon your status, if you're a resident or a traveler. So a traveler is someone, at least in our school, that number one, you begin measuring when you reach the outskirts of your city. So you don't begin measuring distance from the front of your house. You measure from the outskirts of your city. So it works out to about 48, 50 miles from the outskirts of your city. Then you're considered a traveler. And as we go into the Salah and other things like this, you're going to see this thing of traveling is always going to come up, even if it's not in prayer. Like when we talk about, well, it's not mentioned in this text, but other fiqh books, like we just, in our other class on Wednesdays, we talked about the fast of Ramadan, I believe, like 2 weeks ago, and sighting the moon and all of these type of things. And the issue of traveling came up again. So it's really important to remember this. So, when you're considered a traveler, you're allowed to shorten and combine your prayers, meaning those salats that are 4 rakats, you reduce them to 2 rakats. And that's what we mean by shorten and combine. Certain salats can be combined, like Salatul Dhuhr, the afternoon prayer, and Asr, the late afternoon prayer. They can be combined, meaning in the same time period. And Maghrib and Isha can be combined, and in the same time period. And then I'm not going to go off because I can keep going on and off on a tangent of the traveler, but I just wanted to make it clear that it doesn't mean just because you get in your car and you drive somewhere that in English you may be traveling, but that's not what's meant here. What's meant is that you're Islamically, you're according to, technically Islamically, based upon the Shari, you're a traveler. I mean, you have the status of the traveler. And even in some cases, when even though you are not home, at least in our school, when you stay where you're at, when you reach your destination and you stay a certain amount of time, you're no longer considered a traveler. You even pray as a resident. So in your mind, don't think, okay, I'm traveling in English, right? And so that automatically translate to Islam that I'm a traveler. Khalifa, I'm not going there now. He asked me, what is the Maliki position of wiping over the leather socks for Musafir and the one who established? I dedicated a whole class to that, I believe 2 Mondays ago. Because he didn't mention it specifically in his book, but when we were talking about wudu, a lot of questions regarding it came up, so I dedicated a whole class to it.
I wonder if he's talking about, because that's what I was thinking. We're proof
in our school, no. So he said traveling for a purpose in his the 5 legal rulings are always going to keep popping back up. This is another situation where it pops back up. Meaning the reason for your travel has to be, obligatory, wajib, or it has to be mandub, or another word, mustahab, highly recommended. It can't be for a journey that is haram or makruh. It could be a journey for a purpose that's mubah or jaiz, permissible, like going to work, or like you work somewhere far, right? Or examples of haram, right? Maybe, your job is a truck driver and you work for a liquor company. So you drive 18-wheelers transporting malt liquor, right? Across state lines, and you want to you can't, you want to make tayammum as a traveler, but the purpose of your travel is haram. You're transporting kamara, or someone that's a person's he's Muslim and he's from Pittsburgh. His girlfriend lives in Alabama, so he's driving down to Alabama, and he wants to make tayammum. No, right? So going back to the text, this is what's meant here. So he says, not on a mission of ma'asiyah, or not traveling for a purpose of disobedience. And that's why I said these 5 legal judgments, you have to memorize them because they always come up. And the author said in the beginning of the book that a person should not do something unless they know the hukum of Allah regarding it. At least they know the judgment of Allah regarding that thing. So everything we do falls into a category. It's either obligatory, highly recommended, or merely permissible, or it's haram, which is prohibited, or makruh, or it's disliked, or should be avoided. Right? So he said, the traveler who is not on a mission of disobedience, right? And the sick person for the fard as well as the nafila. When he says nafila here, he's referring to any salat other than obligatory prayers. Because, when you talk about nafila salat, you have different types of nafila, but this is anything other than the Salatul Mafruda. This is anything other than the obligatory text. I didn't mean to cut this, man. Anything other than the obligatory text. Salat. So what he's saying here is that the traveler and the sick person, if there are basically 2 general categories that allow a person to use tayammum. Meaning when the person fears sickness, and that gets further broken down, or when there's fear of water. What do we mean? When a person fears sickness, in other words, if he or she fears that if they're going to use the water, it's going to make them sick. Or number 2, they're already sick and they fear that by using water it's going to make them more sick. Or 3, they're already sick, but if they use water for ghusl or wudu, it's going to delay or postpone the healing. And now this fear, is not that you just have this feeling in your head. Either by previous experience or a doctor told you. So this is extremely important. So you do tayammum when you fear sickness, meaning water's there. You can make wudu, right? Sometimes the water is cold. Maybe it's cold and there's no way to heat the water up, and you fear that it may make you sick, right? A lot of times we don't think about these things because we live in this society, and most of us, we live in heated dwellings, and the water's heated, whatever like this. But there are a lot of places where the water is not heated, or heated water is not the norm. Like you all know, I go back and forth to Gambia. They have hot water heaters there, but it's not the norm. They normally have that kind of stuff in, people that got money or hotels where tourists are going to stay at. And it's typically warm in Africa anyway. So, it ain't like the water is as cold coming out of their pipes as it is coming out of our pipes here, right? But sometimes the temperature could drop and, you don't have heated water, or for whatever reason, you can't heat up the water, right? And it may make you sick. So it's not always there is no water, so you make tayammum. Maybe the water's there, but you have this fear of sickness, right? So, and again, you fear that it could make you sick, increase your sickness, or you're already sick and it'll delay your healing. And again, this fear is not based upon, what you think, because, we're a lot of us are some comical cats. Like, we place the judgment of sickness on ourselves if our nose starts running. And so everything Allah said, I'm not fasting today because, my nose is running. I don't feel good. Right? Just look like little corny stuff, like people play with their Islam like that. Right? So no, this is based upon prior experience or a doctor advised them. Some people even specify, say, a Muslim doctor. Right? And so that's fear of sickness, making tayammum. Then you have fear of water, meaning there is no water. Or, like, for example, you don't have no water, but it's just not like, okay, you're in your house, right? And maybe they're doing work on the street and they shut the water off, right? Or maybe you're poor and they shut the water off because you didn't pay your water bill. Whatever the reason, they shut the water off to your house. That's not sufficient. You have to make effort to get water. So even if you can go buy water, you have to buy the water. Or if one of your neighbors can let you borrow water, you have to borrow the water. Even if it's a loan, can I borrow some water? I'll pay you back later on. I give it back to you, whatever. Or you have to seek out a way to get the water, even if you have to travel a little. When I say travel, not like a journey, but hit the road a little bit, right, to find water. And the scholars are even specific. They say about a mile and a half, circumference from where you live at, looking for the water. You go find the water or buy the water or borrow the water or what have you. So fear of water. So in these situations, like you don't have water and you exhausted all of these things and you don't have water. And then, so now you can make tayammum, right? So the sick person and the traveler, if they qualify and they made tayammum, right, they can use that tayammum for their fard prayers and their nafilah prayers and their optional prayers. And then he mentions a third category of people, the healthy resident. The healthy resident, he only can make tayammum for his fard prayers. And I'll continue reading a little bit more. He makes tayammum, before I continue reading, he said he makes tayammum for his fard prayers if he fears the prayer time going out. Now, this is an important thing in our school right here. And I think some other schools differ. In our school, precedence is given to the prayer time over the purification. What do we mean? For example, you don't have any water and you qualify to make tayammum and you fear that you're not going to be able to get any water before the prayer time goes out. So you make tayammum and you make that prayer before the prayer time goes out. Other opinions in other schools, they allow you to, if you know you're going to be able to get water later, right, you let the prayer time go out and then get the water and then make wudu, and then make up the prayer. But in our school, no, the time of prayer takes precedence over the purification. So I hope y'all caught that. Just in case you'll hear something different, you know it's coming from someplace else. Because sometimes you can find, you'll be in situations, you may think, okay, all this stuff is hypothetical, but then the situation happens, you're like, ah, man. For example, you wake up, in the night, right? It's time for subha, or what a lot of people call fajr, right? You wake up, the prayer time is going out. You don't have no water. Tayammum, right? Other people are like, no, you got water. You just woke up a little bit late. You can get water, but you're going to miss the time for the prayer by the time you get the water or make the ablution. And some other opinions, you make the ablution, then you make up the prayer, even if it's late. In our school, the salat time takes precedence over all of the other shurut or conditions of salat. Make the prayer on time. And we talked about this a little bit before. I gave extreme examples of, somebody in prison, they took all of his bed sheets and cut off his water and, took his clothes from him. He's Muslim. He has to pray. He doesn't have anything to cover himself with, can't make ablution. The walls is painted, can't make tayammum on the walls, whatever. He still has to make salat. Part of the conditions of prayer is covering your aura, being in a state of wudu, facing the Qibla. We didn't get to these things yet, but facing the Qibla, right? But maybe he's in that extreme situation I just described, and he may not even know which way the Qibla is, right? He still has to pray on time. And he has to make his best judgment. Continuing. ولا يتيمم الهادر صحيح لنافلة ولا جمعات ولا جنازة إلا إذا تينت عليه الجنازة. He says, the healthy resident cannot, however, do tayammum for a nafila. These other, non-fard prayers. That's what's meant here by nafila. Because, sometimes you look up the optional prayers, they have different levels. And sometimes some may say sunnah muwakkada, right? Highly recommended. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always did it. And then you have nafila, he didn't always do whatever. That's not what's meant here. In this context, what's meant by nafila is every non-obligatory prayer, right? So he says the healthy resident cannot do tayammum for a nafila or juma or janazah prayer unless there is no one who can perform the janazah except him. And we know the janazah prayer is a fard kifaya. It's not an individual obligation. It's a communal obligation. But say there's no one else that can do it. And when we were learning this book with Sheikh, he mentioned that in the Hanafi school, the imam has the most right to lead the janazah prayer. Right? And when you have the tartib, the order of who should lead the prayer, the janazah prayer, he mentioned in the Hanafi school, it's the imam who has the most right to lead. But in the Maliki school, it's the close relative that has the most right to lead. Farouk said, I've seen some Malikis keep a rock in their homes for the purpose of tayammum. Is this a classical, contemporary, or daif position in a Maliki school? Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And when we move a little bit further on in the text, you're going to see why. Because there's only certain surfaces that you can do tayammum. So going back to what we mentioned before about the prayer time takes precedence over ablution, right? An example is you can't find water. It's time for Juma. We're talking about Juma, right? You get ready for Juma. You can't find water. Remember, the prayer time takes precedence over the ablution. So you figure that you can get to water before Dhuhr goes out, because Juma happens during the time of Dhuhr, right? In that situation in our school, you would miss Juma. Then when you get the water, you make wudu, and then you make Dhuhr. See, so it depends on the situation. This is why things are extremely important. And it just came to my mind, Farouk, like most of the masters that I've been to in the African continent, you find rocks, medium-sized rocks, in the musalla, in the masjid for that purpose. Like here, we take it for granted. When you turn the water is always going to be on, right? But over there, it ain't like that. Sometimes people come from a distance and the water's not running in the masjid. There's not enough water, and the containers left over. And, and he's going to miss the prayer. So they would, make tayammum on the rock. So it's actually a good practice to keep a rock for the purpose of tayammum. You never know what type of situation will happen where you can't get water or anything like that. At least you have a surface in your house that you can make tayammum from. We're going to read a description of tayammum, and then we'll open up for questions. I'll put the description of tayammum in the appendix, as well as a footnote. But we didn't get to that footnote yet. And this description of tayammum was taken from Sheikh Uthman Danfodio's book, Ulumu Ma'amila. One begins by striking the earth with his hands. If anything remains on them, he should shake them lightly. Then he wipes his face with them in one single wiping. Then he strikes the earth again with his hands and wipes his right hand with his left. Then he puts his fingers of his left hand over the tips of the fingers of his right hand, and then slides his fingers over the outside of his forearm. He curves his fingers around it until he reaches the elbow. Then he puts his palm on the inside of his arm at the elbow and slides it down until he reaches his wrist. Then he slides the inside of his thumb over the back of his right thumb. Then he wipes his left arm in the same way. That sounds crazy when you read it, but it's real simple. It's just you strike the earth and then you go like this. And then reach the wrist, right? When he reaches his wrist, he wipes his right palm with his left palm to the end of it. In other words, because you already did the back side of your hand, now you do it on the front side. He can wipe the right hand with the left or the left with the right, whichever he prefers, and it is easy for him and completes the wiping. However, the first way is better. If anyone in the state of janaba, in other words, you need to make ghusl, or a menstruating woman cannot find any water for purification after her menses has completed, they would make tayammum and pray. If they find water afterwards, they do not repeat the prayer they made with that tayammum. So in other words, And we mentioned it already, but just to emphasize again, tayammum could be made not only for when you need to make wudu, but also when you need to make ghusl. A lot of people think it's only for wudu or ghusl, for minor and major impurity. So a woman, when she comes from her unclean period, her haid, her menses, or her nifas, or her postnatal bleeding, before she can start praying again and everything, she has to make ghusl. So when she becomes clean again, right, if there's no water, or she falls under one of these cases where, she fears, right, she will make tayammum and pray. Then when she finds water afterwards, she doesn't have to make up that prayer that she made with the tayammum. A man cannot have intercourse with his wife who has been separated from him by the blood of menstruation or postnatal bleeding with the purification of tayammum. He must wait until water is found and the woman purifies herself with it. They do not purify themselves with it together. So in other words, the example we gave, the woman makes tayammum and prays because she just came clean from blood, right? Now her husband can't say, okay, sweetheart, let's, be intimate. No, he has to wait until she finds water to make ghusl, then they can be intimate again. So in other words, tayammum is really so that you can carry out your obligation. And we're going to get a little bit more in that tomorrow when we continue with the fara'id of tayammum. Because, like, for example, when he talks about the intention, the intention is slightly different than the intention for wudu. Because part of your intention for wudu or ghusl is the removal of impurities. It's not the intention for tayammum because it actually doesn't do that. This is a dispensation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so that we can carry out an obligation, meaning the prayer. So, but we're going to talk about that tomorrow, inshallah. Are there any questions? I know there's a delay here, so I'll wait. If any of you need to purchase the book, you can check our website, scrolling beneath your screen. Alhamdulillah. I'm glad you asked that question because it came to my mind when I was reading the description. Sister Julie said, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. Do you strike the stone too? Could you rub in hands if the stone is small? When the word strike is mentioned, don't like literally mean like strike it hard, but you just make contact with it. So the answer to your question is yes, you can rub. Ashley said, can you demonstrate what striking the earth looks like? Yes. And again, strike is, you can even use the word touch. Like if this is the earth, we do it with both hands, that's it. Nothing intricate or detailed or anything like that. Farouk said, no smashing. Feasibility to be firewater, God help it. Oh, he meant the other type of smashing. I thought you meant smash with your hands. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Exactly. Alhamdulillah. So tomorrow we'll finish the section on tayammum. It's just that we're going to make Isha here in a minute, and then we have another class after that, inshallah. And, traditionally when our teachers teach us these things, especially with like wudu, ghusl, tayammum, the demonstration is actually included in the class. Said when substrate of rock, sand is upon the hands. I'm just waiting to see if there's any more questions. Some people type faster than others. No problem, Ashley. Alhamdulillah. Exactly. I'm going to get more detail tomorrow, Ashley. So to answer your question, yes. So it's only the face, hands, and arms with one swipe. Exactly. Not sure what you mean by swipe. I guess you mean wiping. But get the text. It's very important text. You can go to our website. I'll type it in here. You can go there to purchase your copy of the text. Inshallah, we're going to cover that tomorrow, inshallah. Ziryab. We're going to talk about the type of surfaces that you can make tayammum on and those which you can't, inshallah. Be patient with us. We're going to cover that tomorrow, inshallah. One thing I will mention here in closing, I have it in my notes, that the author doesn't mention it in this book, but other books mention it, is that when you have a wound on your body, like a scar or something like that, you know, it kind of like falls under when you fear a sickness. That wound is a sickness. So it depends on the specific situation. If it's on part of your body that you normally wash, or when you make wudu, you know, you wash over the wound. But if you fear that it's going to make it worse or something like that, then you wipe. And if it's still, you know, if you washing it make it worse or make you sick, or wiping it with the water will make it worse or make you sick, even after bandaging it up or whatever like that, even if that will still be a problem, then you can make tayammum. But like I said, the author doesn't mention it in this book, but in our Umdatu Bayan class, Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio, he mentions it in his book Umdatu Bayan in the section of tayammum. In the case when you have a wound or an injury on your body, and he mentions these things. Nah, that was something else. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khairan. Inshallah, we'll be back in about 15 minutes or so, inshallah, with the next class. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.